Today, me and my squeaky chair are going to talk about value scales. We are also going to talk about how to use your paintbrush and sort of push the paint around, and then we're going to talk about how to blend. So all of these things are really going to help you when you get to your painting. And this is going to be for acrylic paint. So watercolor paint is a little bit different. Oil paint's a little bit different, but for right now we're just going to focus on some acrylic paint here and how to create those value scales, what's the best way to do them, those kinds of things, and then how to blend and how to push the paint around. So what you're going to have is in your sketchbook, you're going to set up two different value scales. I would turn it horizontally, please, so that you have enough room. Vertically, you won't have enough room in your sketchbook. So label it value scales on the top, and then you're going to have 9 boxes. All right, so you're going to do a really big, long, rectangular box and then split it up into 9 separate boxes. On the top, label it tint. So a tint is a lightened color. A tint is when you add white. So you're actually changing the color. You're not changing the intensity or how strong the color is or bright how the color is, but you're actually changing it. So you're going to have a tint value scale. Your dominant color is what you are picking to work with. So I'm using yellow because I want you to see what it does with white and with black. Just because it does change. So write your dominant color, whatever that may be. So you are writing like blue or purple or teal or whatnot, and then draw a line to light over here. So this should be as light as you can get it. Then your second little value scale here is going to be your shade. All right, so a shade is when you're adding black, you're making a darkened color. Again, we're changing the color, so you'll have your dominant color. I'm using yellow, you'll use whatever, and a long arrow to dark. You should have some water. You should also have a paper towel and some paint. So in your paint palette, you're going to have 2 little sections of whatever color you're using. You're going to have 1 section of black and 1 section of white. Now you can see I did not fill these to the top. You don't need a lot of paint for this type of tutorial or practice or anything like that because you're just practicing. So and this is a good place to determine, is this the dominant color that I want? Do I want yellow? Do I want orange or whatever? Okay, so this is a great place to sort of practice and work with it. So you're going to do that first. But again, please, please, please be mindful of how much paint you are using. Also be mindful of the bottles because they aren't indestructible, so the tops and stuff. If there's paint stuck in the top, it would be really awesome if you could show kindness and to clean out the top of the paint lid if you need to do so. It could be as simple as just like peeling off a piece of paint, so it's not that hard. So here's what I have. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set it off to the side over here because I'm right-handed, so it just is easier for me. The first 2 boxes, well, the first box in each little section here are going to be just your plain color. So with acrylic, you don't necessarily have to use water. You can water it down for certain effects, but acrylic is supposed to be thick. So my brush has not had any water on it yet, and you just dip your paintbrush in the paint and work with it. So I'm going to dip my paintbrush in my yellow, and I want my value scales to look nice, so I'm going to do nice up and down strokes. I am going to make sure I stay in my boxes as best I can, and I know you're like, well, it's just practice, does it really matter? Yes, it does, because then when you get to your final, you will know how to do things neatly. All right, I still have enough paint on my paintbrush to do the shade part. So I'm going to come down here and do the shade. Both boxes just have the normal, regular, dominant color. It has not been altered in any way. Okay? So there we go. Pretty easy, right? All right, so now I'm going to move this here so you guys can see what I'm going to do. I am going to do my tints first, just because they're on the top. So when I do that, I'm going to take a scoop of white. I'm going to mix it in with my yellow here. The key is to really make sure you're really mixing it in. And with yellow or with other lighter colors, you may not see a change at all. But I promise you it is. It is changing. Just make sure you're really mixing it in. I always try to clean up the edges so my paint doesn't go over the top. Get off some of that paint, and I am going to come back up here. You can see there's a slight change. Not much, which I wasn't expecting because white is a very light color. So why is it going to change that much, right? I am not going to wash my brush. I don't need to because I'm going to continue to add white. So I'm going to continue to add white in here. And I am just mixing it in, making sure it's really mixed nice and well. I'm not going to waste your time and do the whole value scale. So I'm just going to show you a couple boxes. Hopefully you see some change in here. You can see I'm holding my paintbrush like a pencil. I am going up and down. We do not want to destroy our brushes, so we need to be nice to them, which means no smashing them or anything like that. I'm going to take off some of that paint there because I have a lot. Again, scoop of white. I'm trying to get the same amount of white on my brush every single time. So I'm not taking a little amount one time and a large amount the other time. You want to really, really try to get the same amount of paint on your paintbrush every time so that you have a nice, even transition. So that all of a sudden it's not like yellow and then white. So we don't want that. So again, it is getting lighter. Hopefully you guys can see that. My paint went a little crazy up there. Okay, I'm gonna do one more box and then we'll move on because you guys get the idea right now. So I'm making sure I have the same amount of white on my brush. And you can see this is why I don't need a lot of the yellow. I probably got a little bit more yellow than I needed. I could totally get less because you're adding paint to your yellow or your dominant color. So you don't need a lot of paint. I could have totally gotten way less in both of my little sections here. You're going to need a little bit more white than you will another color just because white is so light and so it's not as powerful. Right, so you can see that it has lightened up from there, and I would just keep going. Scoop of white, mix it in, paint. Scoop of white, mix it in, paint, and go all the way down. Once you're done with your value scale on that end, that's when you can wash your brush. All right, you don't need to wash it any other time beforehand. There might be some paint on the metal part, which normally we don't necessarily like it on there, but for right now it's going to happen because you're mixing a lot of color together. So that's where your paper towel comes in, where I just pick it up and sort of brush it off. Because I'm brushing it, I'm holding it down, I have gotten paint back on my bristles, so I just need to really wash them off again, okay? And then get off some of that water. All right. Hopefully you're good with the tint. All right, you just keep going. Let's do the shade now. Now this is sort of why I really wanted to show you yellow. So first of all, yellow doesn't change much with white. So that is something to think about. But then also it will change drastically with your black, your shade. So let's talk about it. All right, because black is such a powerful color, I don't need to scoop like I did with the white. I'm really just gonna get the end of my brush. Look at hardly anything on here. I'm gonna take off a little bit even. Hardly anything on my brush. I did not scoop it, I just dipped it in. And now I'm gonna mix it in with the yellow. So you can see already there is a drastic change in what I am doing. Look at that, holy cow. So I always tell people that this is a great way to tell if these are the colors you want, but also yellow may not, you may want something like yellow, okay? You have to be okay with having it sort of be a little greenish for a little bit. Because that's what happens when you make it a shade. All right, so we're gonna dip again. It is gonna be greenish. I always say it sort of looks like baby poop or something along those lines, but you can tell it really, really changes super quick. And I really want your value scales to be gradual. So it's very, you know, you can hardly tell, and then all of a sudden you can tell. With your lighter colors, that's not gonna happen when you get to your shade. It's just not. But after that initial change, it should be gradual then. There's no reason why it should be a really big change after that first time. Again, making sure you're really mixing it in and that your boxes look nice. 2 more boxes of this and then we'll be done and we'll move on to the next little thing I want to show you here. Another one on my brush. All right, so you can tell it gets darker. It's getting a little bit more like army greenish. Now, if you finish these value scales and they don't get totally white or totally black, that's okay, but nowhere in your painting should there be a solid color of white or a solid color of black. It should have a tiny bit of your dominant color in it, no matter what. All right, so we are never painting with just white and we are never painting with just black. We are also not mixing white and black together. All right, so I'm never taking like, oh, I have some yellow in here and now I'm gonna add black to it. We're not doing that, all right? So now I can wash off my brush. You would obviously finish these and let them dry. This is, again, a good chance to decide if this is really what you want or not. So the next thing I'm going to show you is blending. And I'm going to get another piece of paper for that, so just a second. Okay. So I should have gotten more yellow. I didn't, but I can show you blending. Anyway, so I'm just washing off my brush real quick, get all of that stuff off. So the great thing with a monochromatic painting, which is what you're going to be working on, is that you don't necessarily need to wash your brush out often. You can continue to layer and go over it. One of the most amazing, best things I think about acrylic painting is that if you mess up one day, you let it dry and you paint over it the next day. It's awesome in that respect. Watercolor, you can't do that. Oil paintings, you can't do that. It's just with acrylic. So it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to mess up. You go over it again. And actually, acrylic loves to be layered. So I would highly suggest that you do go over areas multiple times. It will create more dimension and more depth, more realisticness, which all of those 3 things are what you're going for. So when you are blending, you really want to make sure that the paint is wet. You can't blend on something that's dry. So if you wanted something to blend and you let it dry and you come back tomorrow and you try to blend on top of it, it's not gonna work. But that's okay because you can layer. You really, really want whatever color you are putting together to be wet. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna work with white and yellow here, just because that color is sort of hard, and hopefully you guys will be able to see it. If not, I might do that too. So we're just practicing. So you are going to be doing this in your sketchbook. I would practice blending maybe as a larger area, and then I want you to practice blending on your little mini sketch that you did in your sketchbook. So I'm layering this on. The reason I'm layering it on is because we're not working on canvas right now, which doesn't have the paint doesn't dry as fast. We're working on regular paper. So we're just going to go like this. And again, I don't really need to wash my brush out. I'm going to just get some of the paint off, and I'm going to scoop up some white and maybe dab a little bit of yellow. Oh, there goes my lights. Hold on. Okay, so I'm just going to dab a little bit of my other color just so that it can make blending a little bit easier. And then I'm going to go right next to it. So it is lighter, and I want to blend these 2 together. Again, I'm going to take a little bit more white, so I'm layering this on here. I really, really love to mix colors on my canvas. That may not be you. You may want to mix colors inside your palette, which is okay. So what I'm going to do now is I have 2 wet colors here. They're nice and layered. I'm going to keep a little space in between that doesn't have any color, because that's what I'm going to do. That's how I'm going to blend it. So I do have a lot of paint on my brush. I'm going to just take it and sort of dab it off a little bit on my paper towel. So I just took a little bit off because I don't need a ton. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take this darker color and pull it into the lighter color. I'm going to take the lighter color and pull it into the darker color. Okay, and I'm doing this very gently, not as hard as I was when I added the color on, but you can see now there's a really nice blend there. All it took was having something be wet, another thing being wet, and not having as much on my brush and going back and forth really gently. When I normally paint, my brush is really spread out. So you can see that I really wasn't, when I was blending, it was not spread out as much. I was barely touching the paper because you don't want to scrape off the paint. You want them to blend nice back and forth. So that's what you want to do with blending, is you really want to do it gently. And let's say it doesn't work out, okay? Let it dry. If you do it in the beginning of class, it'll be dry within 15 minutes. You can try it again. Not a big deal. If you're doing it like on your canvas, if you're doing for practice, go to a different spot on your paper, okay? A couple of tips I want to give you is when you're doing a straight line, I'm gonna actually wash my brush here because I want to do it with a darker color so you can see. When you're doing a straight line, you don't want to watch your brush. You want to watch underneath your brush, where your brush is going, I should say. So when I have a little bit of paint on here, it's always good to have your hand or your forearm resting on the table when you do something in a straight line. So I'm going to watch right below my paintbrush, and I'm going to watch my paintbrush where it's going. Now I don't have a line that I'm following, so I'm just trying to make a straight line, which I'm not very good at unless I have a line I'm following. But you want to just follow where your brush is going, all right? As my brush gets drier, which this is a technique you guys can use, it's called dry brushing. You can see I'm getting more texture. This might be something you want to use on top of your original painting, like for trees, I don't know, grasses, clothing even, but you want to do that. You really want to make sure you have a good amount of paint on your brush if you are trying to do something that's really solid. Okay, so I sort of wiggled off a little bit there. And I always go back to the top and bring that paint down. So you're the boss of the paint. If you've got a big glop, fix it, all right? So wipe off some of your brush and your palette or on your paper towel and come back in and take off some of that paint really nicely and gently so you don't have it anymore. Okay, make it nice and even if that's what you want. When I am doing a lot of things, I will only put paint on one side of my brush. Hopefully you guys can see that. But I only put paint on one side of my brush because sometimes I will start and I'll start where the paint is and I'll push it over to the other side so I can do what I want with it. All right, so I come back and push it over to the other side and it goes really a long way because I'm pushing the paint where I want it to go. Be the boss of the paint. Don't let it rule you. But always remember, you can come back tomorrow and start new. All right, so I hope these helped you. You will, in your sketchbook, need to do your value scales and some practice blending before you can go onto your canvas.